Yo, how's it going, y'all? Today we have a new part of the hypothetical series of revisiting the Mega Man weapons, doing some retouches to them if possible, and adding power gear versions to the Side weapons. This is part 2. Part 1 was months ago. I have tackled on how the Mega Buster and its variants look, and the very classical weapons of Mega Man 1 powered up. Today we are touching on the popular kind of weapons with the Mega Man 2 arsenal. In the light of my personal perspective, this is the wackiest set of weapons, and I'm honestly up for the challenge of making amendments to those. So let's see how I did. Let us start with the undefeatable Airman and his Air Shooter. Now Air Shooter is a very decent weapon, I'll give you that. It is reasonably strong since it is a shotgun. Now behold my fabulous and probably my most wacky take on the design ever. Air Shooter in 11 style. Why bro, so ears? This abomination is directly inherited from Airman's designs, with the buster and the goofy ass helmet resembling Airman's body itself. My other take on the helmet was to make it a simple Rockman head shape with a fan attached to it, but eventually I came to the realization that it was bland. Just don't laugh at my son. I kept the base Air Shooter essentially the same. It does its work splendidly and not as broken. However, I slightly changed the ammo consumption. One blow from an air shooter takes 1.5 points, so it can reasonably balance how fast it can kill enemies nearby. Plus, a half point for each twister makes more sense. The power gear lets you emit a stream of wind that rips through and deals considerable damage. And you can as well press the up button while shooting the airstream or right when you are doing so to boost yourself upward, leading to division happening to the airstream for more coverage and mobility options. I took the concept of Storm Tornado from the X series to this power gear because honestly, I had little to no idea on what to do. I gave it this boost to add more viability and to open the gate for more creativity. Since the power gear gives you more potential, I thought maybe some weapons could grant a recourse in a way since you will be powered up enough to do it. And by the way, you can fly upward if you are already on air. Slicing through our next entry, we have Metal Blade. This is by far the most controversial one out of what I think to be every literal Mega Man weapon. The weapon is multi-directional, quite primful and spammable too. Only the fire rate spam and the plentiful ammo capacity are what make it quite the replacement for the Mega Buster. Here we have the design. If this design doesn't scream edgy to use, then I don't know what will. Oh, good point. Anyways, in this version, I kept the multi-direction aspect, but I tamed the fire rate and added a tiny bit of delay when you shoot a blade after another, as well as made it so only 2 blades are on one screen, and it is now 1 point of ammo per throw. To compensate for all of this, however, I gave it the property to rip through enemies and shield enemies at that, but with a little twist. If you throw a metal blade against an enemy that is 1 tile wide, it will deal 1 constant damage. If the enemy is a bit wider, like a Sniper Joe which is 2 tiles wide for instance, on the first hit it will deal 1 damage, on the second half it will deal double the damage it previously did. For this example it is 2. If the enemy is shielded, instead of 1 damage it is half damage now, empowering that resistance. If wide, it will still apply the same logic and double the damage it previously did on the second half. This of course applies to how deep the metal blade goes through objects, so if you aim it from below a tall enemy, it will deal a drastic damage to it regardless. As for the power gear, you start by throwing 3 blades in your direction, then you do a backflip to throw another 3 in your opposite direction. I really didn't think of much to do for this. I had the option to make it a big metal blade, but that's too boring for a weapon like this if you ask me. I saw this one as a better candidate because if you can already throw multiple directions, then why not lose more marbles and throw more at once? With style, don't forget about that style. And by the way, you can hold yourself on air if you use it on air. Swaying next to Leaf Shield. The problematic point of this shield weapon is that it doesn't shield you the right way. It technically does, but purposely to enemies that head towards you. The point of most barrier-like weapons is to protect yourself from any direct/indirect enemy projectiles. Furthermore, some people do not like how it flies off when you move. Moving to my design of it, I've made it nature-friendly with all of the leafy aesthetic, and that's to also put an emphasis on them for the weapon. As far as it goes, however, I've made it so it acts the same, but it shields you this time, and the bear has its own health points with color indications conveying how weak it gets. Upon holding the fire button, you can keep the barrier in place while you are moving. If you let go off of the button, it will fly off like normal. The leaf shield will absorb any damage a projectile does while protecting you, then reduce that amount from its health. But if we are talking about defending yourself against opponents, then you should be aware that this leaf shield will only take up to an enemy up to 3 health points, since that's the damage it deals. I reasoned that I could base it on that. The power gear is a wild one. Even MegaMan realizes that and returns to Monkey. It is the same as Woodman's leaf dance move, which by itself makes more sense for a power gear. I hope those tweaks for the leaf shield satisfy those who didn't like it. Leading our way next to Bubble Lid. Now this is one of the weapons that got heavily collapsed by the game's poor way of balancing. It is a fine weapon in and of itself, like many of the other crawling weapons, but I personally would raise its efficiency a bit. Firstly, the design is Bubbleman heavy, even he got a mask for closer resemblance and goggles. Secondly, I made it so it bounces on the ground surface, which mind you could be a helpful little pet when traversing uneven terrain. And if it hits a water level surface, it behaves like the vanilla one. I could see that interaction getting implemented in level design in a Mega Man 2 remake or something, or if I decided to remake it myself. Underwater, Bubble Lid rises upward in a wavy pattern similar to that of Bubble Bomb from Mega Man V on Game Boy. I try to avoid weapons clashing with one another, but this can be an exception since it is an extraordinary interaction only and doesn't explode like Bubble Bomb. And for the power gear, it's nothing that special. You just shoot more bubbles the longer you press the fire button, because if you have the power gear potential to spam objects, you can just do it. This is a shallow logic. Next is Atomic Fire. I posted a question on Twitter about potential fixes for this weapon, and I received several similar and sensible replies. Primarily the ammo consumption, since originally it would discharge a single fully charged fire to rapidly deplete its ammo. The other was to shorten the time it took to charge. I wouldn't mind it the way it is because the idea is to fire a lethal shot. Thus, charging a lot would be a great way to make up for it. Still, I believe there is a room for improvement, so I gave thought to it. I did just that and made it so it take a bit of less time, and now the big charged fire take only 4 ammo points. You can shoot the massive charged fire in mid-charging and the mid-charged fire without charging when using power gear. When you are completely charged in power gear form, you unleash an atomic-looking sun that detonates on whatever surface it comes into contact with, delivering 10 damage and setting off a solar wave explosion. I took the name comic a little too seriously. The ability to dash through flames is not a feature I would want in a power gear because I believe it could eventually clash with another weapon's power gear, so I took that route as a safe one. Quick Boomerang is next. For some people, Quick Boomerang is either a good or an okay weapon, which I can agree with. However, one thing that always irked me about it is that it got a lot of capacity, similar to Middle Blade, but this got way more. 8 boomerangs per 1 point. Why? That's crazy under reverence. I have fixed it so it consumes only 2 boomerangs per point, but it will still do its job with no issue. Reducing the ridiculousness is just my aim there. The power gear is straightforward. You get more range for the boomerangs and you shoot bigger ones in a faster manner. I suppose people would think making it homing boomerang like Quickman would do, but that's more bland than this idea, to be honest. Crash Bomber is next. I gotta say, this one was a bit tough to design well. At one point I had MegaMan amputated with red card paper for a helmet, but hey, isn't it any better than this emo-inducing monstrosity? Crash Bomber had a Mega Man 2 moment of not being well balanced, since it doesn't hit most objects right and would sometimes not stick to anything and explode. So pretty much what all I had to do was to make it stick to anything, any enemy, and make it explode after a tiny bit to spread cheesy looking explosions that dealt constant 3 damage. The power gear is another straightforward but unique one in my opinion. You spread 3 Crash Bombers on the ground and only on the ground, similar to Crashman. It adds more coverage like this and a unique twist instead of being just a bigger bomb. To be fair, I had a more grossing approach way back then in 2018, and I made it so a Crash Bomber leaves a giant impact on an enemy that sends it flying all over the place for whatever reason. I don't know what I was cooking or smoking, but forgive me. Finally was Time Stopper. Let's say that this weapon was the reason I got induced into starting this continuation. The weapon is bad, it is only useful once, but barely in normal gameplay. Mostly you would use it on Quickman or his stage, which sucks, so for my take I gave him the exact Flashman Buster and went fancy with the helmet design. Just don't be harsh on him for having less brain cells, he is trying his best. Disclaimer, I took the following idea from a mod of Doom. Mega Man 8-bit Deathmatch. If you don't know about it, then where were you living before the COVID days? It is a great fan game. The mod is called V-Classes. You play as robot masters with extra steps for the gameplay, and Flashman got an orb-looking move that stops the movement of an opponent. So I basically took the concept and translated it in 2D. So shout out to the V-Classes dev team. One orb consumes 2 points of ammo and freezes the enemy, as I said, but the burst of flashes it produces will freeze any enemy that makes contact with it. It is a standard time stopper for the power gear, but it deals 4 points of damage to anything on screen. Unlike the original weapon, you can of course keep shooting with the flash orb during that effect. By the way, the time stopper effect on the screen lasts for a short while and doesn't use up ammo to keep going. We finished! Another set of weapons done! This was more enjoyable than the previous set. The flaws of these weapons, specifically, they made me perceive myself as a real game developer. It's a very different vibe from what I'm accustomed to, that is. And real quick, I want to announce that I am also open for pixel art commission. Be it animation, or sprites for whatever you want in your game perhaps, or profiles and portraits. I do a lot of stuff in my free time. I got 2 to 3 years of experience, so I decided to take this approach. If you are any interested, you can contact me on my Coffee page or Discord. My Discord tag is Kroby_, or even perhaps on Twitter or X, whatever. But yes, thank you good fellas for watching this video, and I'll see you in the very next one.